Okay, seniors, I'm back for instructions about how to write the conclusion. This is going to be assignment number 2. Now, if you have done the introduction, then you created an attention grabber. And one of the most effective ways of beginning a conclusion is to actually do what I call bookending the attention grabber, which is you come back to your attention grabber for the first sentence or two of your conclusion. You know how you can have bookends that you like set up at either side so you can create a little shelf? That's kind of what you think about it. And what you're looking at here, and this is that same handout, the How to Introductions and Conclusions handout, is the first thing up here is just kind of the 4 things you want to think about or you want to do in a conclusion. And they really should be in a different order. Number 2 should be first, I think. Now, you don't have to do this. If you have something that you can start your conclusion with, that's not your thesis, of course, then that's fine. But I find it really effective if you can come back to that attention grabber, because that was something, or that is something I struggle with on conclusions, is how do I start it? You know, it's like once I get going, I'm okay, but getting it going is the hard part. And if you look at those samples, then you'll see, I think probably all 3 of them do that same kind of bookending thing. So once you've started it, you've come back to the attention grabber, then you want to wrap everything up. And I know this isn't as precise. The instructions for how to write a conclusion are not as precise as the introduction. I'm sorry. But you want to wrap things up. And so I tend to think of, okay, well, I need to talk about what do I get from both the body paragraphs or all 3 of the body paragraphs. I need to reconnect to the thesis, which means I need to come back to that main idea. And then ultimately, the second thing besides the bookending advice that I think is really, really useful for conclusions is number 4 here, where it says speculate on why this paper would matter to somebody in the real world. Because the other thing that I always struggle with conclusions, and a lot of kids do, is I've said everything I already need to say in my body paragraphs. I don't have anything else to say. I'm just going to repeat myself. But if you can connect your paper to why everybody should care about it, that's something new probably, and it'll give you something to talk about. If you scroll down to the next page, I've got some more specific instructions about reconnecting and bookending up here. I've got more information about drawing conclusions, why this matters in the real world, so you can read all that on your own. But I find, especially this last part, why it matters in the real world, this to me is where I can actually get some length in a conclusion, because I can kind of, why should people care about this? People that aren't writers, that aren't readers. Like if you're writing about the death penalty, why should someone who's never been affected by the death penalty care about it? So you really can you can find yourself writing for quite a while when you start trying to connect this to, your average everyday person. The other thing I've included on this document is from the University of North Carolina Chapel Hill's Writing Lab. And it's basically 4 examples of what not to do in a conclusion that I would suggest you read. These are ineffective conclusions, and it describes just 4 things that people do that they're just not very interesting, and it's not very effective as a conclusion. So this is the conclusion you want to write. Put this on, obviously not on assignment number 2. Put it on the rough draft. Go to the whatever the below the last body paragraph you wrote, whether that was 2 or 3, and write your conclusion. Now, after you have your conclusion, you need to then copy and paste your bibliography below the conclusion, because you want to have your bibliography on the same document the entire rough draft is on. And I'll probably, you want to make sure that you've got all your sources and you don't have any sources that you didn't wind up using, and that all those mistakes on the bibliography, that way back when, the annotated ones, all of those mistakes have been corrected. But again, you'll want to look at the, let me find it, rough draft. So basically, once you've written the introduction and conclusion, then you want to come over here to this rough draft turn-in checklist, because this is a list of questions that is kind of like, here are all the final things you do before you turn your paper in. And you want to go through here and make sure you've done all of them. It's a way, this really can save your grade, because it reminds you of things that you may or may not have remembered to do at this late date. So that's the conclusion. If you have any questions, feel free to email me or come to one of the Zoom meetings.